Hubris is when you get cursed by the gods, okay? And you get specifically cursed by the gods when you start challenging the
don't
gods.
They know the story of the golem?
Or all of these, you shall not trespass in God's domain kind of stuff. That's a real story, and we've done it over and over again.
Over and over again.
And so, there's now a compound with literal monsters in it, with a giant fence around it, like Jurassic Park.
This actually exists.
This actually exists.
Today is Friday, April 11th. This is Mind Body Evolution. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well. How are you, Eric?
I'm very well. Very excited to be recording again after a couple of weeks when we couldn't get to it.
Yeah. I love recording. I just have so much in my head that needs to come out. It's constant, and it also allows me not to live in some of the horrible world we are now creating for ourselves, and I can think about more interesting things.
I guess it is something I don't think about it that way, that we are creating for ourselves. That's exactly what's happening.
So I can watch the news and not always be in despair, and I can look outside and not always be in despair. So I like to think about interesting things that sort of grasp my attention. There's been something in the news recently. We've created direwolves. This is an extinct species of giant wolf, as seen on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only time I've actually ever seen direwolves referred to other than in a Grateful Dead song was in the Game of Thrones. Is this what a direwolf is?
That's what we've made. It was
giant bearish dog.
It was Game of Thrones fans who made it. They have 3 of them, and they're named Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi.
This is terrible.
Maybe. Or maybe it's amazing.
Why couldn't it be Star Trek fans who made a communicator or a transporter?
They did those things somewhat too. We had flip phones for a while, and then we moved beyond that. No, we've lived in the world of nerds for a long time, and for good or ill. And so that's some of what I want to talk about, is how while we tend to think of ourselves as these sort of interchangeable components in this huge society, there's also these individuals who, through force of will, which is not always the best thing, are able to sometimes change things. And that's what I want to talk about. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I just got back from a trip to Rome. It was amazing. I got to see this incredible artwork that was all the expression of tremendous egos doing really good work, but they were also, murdering thieves, and they were fascists, and they were all of that was happening in Rome for thousands of years. An emperor would see a villa he liked, and he would just murder who was in it, and then he had a villa he liked. And
I guess that's pretty straightforward. Simple.
It's pretty straightforward and simple. And a pope would say, I need some new decorations for my palace. Go dig over there. Anything you find, fix it and stick it in my palace. So new heads would be put on the Roman statues that they dug up, and they would, totally dig up for example, a baths. So, a Roman bath that had been ruined for 1,500 years, they would dig up and take all the statues and put them in their villas. And so I was seeing what sort of hubris and vanity and all of this can do on a grand scale. And it was beautiful and also terrifying at the same time. And it was a very interesting trip. And I started to think about the nature of the individual and how things like this can happen from people just puffing up their own ego. And at the same time, I like to look out in the natural world. I've mentioned this the white-throated sparrow song that I heard several years ago.
Yeah.
That was like Philip Glass. It was just an amazing composer. I've now heard a new one, and it's really interesting because during the season, the male maybe. It's not a completely defined term in this species, but anyway.
We'll talk about that another time.
It fills with testosterone, and their brain actually grows, particularly things in the language region of the brain. The same one we have, the FOXP2 language region of the brain, grows in response to the hormone. And they are able to sing because of the growth of their brain in this language region. So it's almost like a flowers for Algernon. They're waking up, and they're having this new capability of communication. And when they start singing, it first starts, it's sort of like, and it's kind of creaky, and it's not great, and they're not really good at it. But they start communicating with each other, and so they'll be one going dee 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 dee, another one will go dee 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 dee, and so you hear them playing tunes to each other. Mm-hmm. And then this one that I heard many years ago was able to play a tune to itself and remember it over 15, 20 minutes.
Yes, you have spoken about this.
And it was breathtaking. Yes. I wish I could remember music better. But recently, I've been listening to a neighborhood white-throated sparrow, and I can hear its brain improving, and its song's been getting better over time. And it's not going in the Philip Glass direction. It's much more sort of like Baroque chamber music. It's like a dun 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 dun. It's been doing that kind of stuff.
You should try to get a recording of this.
It'll be really difficult, but it's obviously much higher pitch than that. Yeah. But I definitely have heard some Beethoven. I've heard little tunes, and it's again playing to itself, but it's a different thing, right? There was a different genius, and now 5 years later, I'm hearing a new genius. I've heard white-throated sparrows in between, but no one reached a new level, but now it's happened again. And this must be happening all the time everywhere. If it's happening with a few dozen sparrows that I've been hearing over the years. And so this is sort of what I was thinking about is how this kind of genius is also associated with ego. And that's what the sparrow's doing. I'm here, I'm the best, and I'm making this beautiful music for the world, but specifically to get a mate, and the mate has to be able to understand my genius to come to me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking for a particular kind of mate who has some of the genes that would, further my genius. Mm-hmm. And this is all absolute hubris, and it's, built into our evolution right from the very beginning, and is built in the creation of this really almost transcendent beauty that can come from what is also the downfall of humanity. I mean, hubris to the ancient Greeks was part of what was creating the Trojan War. It was the end of a civilization. I've talked about how I think the Trojan War was discussing the end of the Bronze Age. It was the Bronze Age collapse and the beginning of a new Dark Ages. Mm-hmm. And the Trojan War is the ships of Greece going to burn the civilizations on the mainland in Troy. And so that was the hubris of the Greek army, destroying everything around it, but creating this transcendent epic that we still know today. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily to the good of everyone involved.
Right.
And that's part of the story is, Agamemnon gets himself murdered. He murders his own daughter. There's lots of murdering
mm-hmm.
and the house of Agamemnon is cursed. And is known for this curse that passes through because of the hubris and the ego, but they're also immortal, right? We still speak of them, which was the point, which was the entire point because of their hubris.
Yes.
And so, this is the kind of stuff where you get both of these things going on. And, I saw it definitely when I saw, Elon Musk sending his Tesla into space. I was weeping with the beauty of that, and yet it was all foreshadowing of what we see now, where essentially he's gone completely to the dark side, and he's embraced fascism and destruction, and he's not creating things anymore, mm-hmm. and it is all destruction, which is the essence of.
He does run a bunch of companies that make things,
and they're being destroyed. And some of them were good, right? Electric cars were saving the planet, and now we're not buying them anymore. And that's not a good thing, but I'm not going to buy one.
Not one of his.
Not one of his.
There's definitely others, though, and the Chinese are making them.
Exactly. And what are we doing to the Chinese? I mean, exactly. So
that's not what this is supposed to be.
This is not what it's about. So what I'm saying is in the world we see today, we see how hubris leads to a whole bunch of bad things very quickly, but can also make amazing things. We can launch a Tesla into space. That's an amazing thing. That was a moment of accomplishment. I'm not sure if it amounted to anything, but it was, it was a test drive for some other things that have gone further. We now have a real presence in space, partly because of this.
Because of the Tesla?
No, because of the launch capabilities. But I wanted to talk about this in relation to the direwolf. So. Direwolf.
That's right, the direwolf.
Right. The direwolf is an extinct species of wolf that roamed North America for, 150,000 years or something like that, maybe more. No, 5.5 million years.
Really?
Was when they switched, when their first ancestors split from other wolves, was about 5.5 million years ago. So splitting from the gray wolf. When they were exactly dire wolves after that, I don't know the exact details.
Big giant things?
They were the extra big wolf. Yes. So they stood 25-50% larger than a regular wolf.
600 pounds of sin?
Yeah, they had giant teeth. They were designed to crush bone. They were designed to hunt very large Pleistocene Ice Age animals, mammoths, all of that kind of stuff.
Wow, so they were pretty scary.
They were very, very scary. They were literal monsters. And there is a company, I think of it as the Gigantosaurus company, but its name is Colossal Bioscience.
That doesn't sound good. I don't like that.
No, it sounds like a villain in a movie.
Scary, yeah.
And so Colossal Bioscience has this idea that they're going to recreate Pleistocene fauna and recreate an ecosystem that was destroyed when humans came to North America and wiped out the mastodons and the mammoths and all of the megafauna
Is
of
that
North
what
America.
happened?
Yeah, probably.
We wiped them out.
Yeah. So the dire wolf existed to about 12,500 years ago, which coincides with when people showed up.
Right. Okay.
And we probably didn't kill them directly. They were way big, but we killed the things they hunt.
Right. We killed what they ate.
And so then the gray wolf came into the vacuum and came down through Canada. So everything else was evolving in Eurasia. The gray wolf, the dholes, which were a kind of African wild dog, the coyotes, all of these things were Eurasian canids, but the dire wolf was the North American species. So very patriotic monster.
So we've been working on climate change since the moment we got here.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly change our environment wherever we are in a drastic way.
Drastic way.
And so, yeah, we as a single culture, we had gone from coast to coast across North America as soon as we arrived and wiped everything out.
Was the dire wolf the apex predator at its time, or just
well, there was also the saber-toothed cats, but the dire wolf had a pack. And so they were, I think, the apex predator in that terms. When they were in a pack, yeah. The saber-toothed cat is hard to beat, but a pack of dire wolves, I can't imagine anything more powerful, except there were a bunch of things. There were giant pigs with huge tusks that ran like horses. Sometimes called the hell pig. So anyway, it was a time of a lot of big, nasty things, and we've decided to recreate some of them.
Why?
Well, see, that's the thing. I would say that this is hubris, and it's exactly why Musk was launching a Tesla into space.
We're doing it because we can.
Because we can.
Because we can doesn't mean we should, right? I mean,
and yet it is absolutely beautiful. Okay, so here's the so gorgeous. I mean, these are amazing animals. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, or you like wolves in general, which are both of those apply to me, they're amazing.
I'm holding my head in my hands.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is we could create the entire ecosystem that we had destroyed. We could atone for our prior sins and recreate a tundra ecosystem with large animals as an intact thing. We don't have Pleistocene ecosystems outside of Africa. The reason we have an intact, more or less, Pleistocene ecosystem in Africa is all of those things try and kill humans as soon as they see them. And so they were able to defend themselves against our ancestors until we got guns. There's nothing you can do with a spear against a whole herd of elephants coming at you. You just run and hope you survive. And it's true for a whole range of the animals in Africa.
I have walked with the smaller elephants in Surin, and yeah, I can't imagine if they were angry and running.
Yeah, and so African elephants are very aggressive. They're even more aggressive than the Asian elephants.
Giant.
And they're gigantic. They're bigger. They're bigger than. And so, Africa, you're essentially looking at an intact Pleistocene fauna.
That's why everything is bigger.
Well, it's bigger, and it didn't get wiped out by us. We killed all the big things everywhere else.
Right.
The big things learned how to defend themselves because they co-evolved with us, and were able to keep going when we showed up.
Right.
And they knew what to do when they saw us, which was kill us. And a group of our ancestors barely made it out. At the time when we were leaving, parts of us were leaving Africa, our total population was like 50,000.
I mean, this is something you turned me on to in college, is that the birds announce our coming.
Yeah. No, everything knows to be afraid of us, and they're talking about us. But yeah, so anyway, back to Hubris. We created these beautiful, beautiful animals to recreate an ecosystem. Our first goal had been the mammoth. They wanted to recreate a mammoth.
I'm sorry, no. We don't want to recreate
the
this
idea
whole
is
ecosystem that
mammoths,
wants to kill us.
We know elephants control their ecosystem. They level the trees. They create the Serengeti in many ways. And so there's parts of probably the taiga that could be mammoth habitat, except they've been overgrown with trees for the last 20,000 years because we wiped out the mammoths. If we reintroduce them, we might be recreating certain habitats that haven't existed before. If you're going to recreate mammoths, you're going to have to recreate a predator for mammoths. So that was the idea behind the dire wolves.
But I'm sorry, all of this, I still have to say why.
Essentially atoning for sins, and because they'd be super cool, and who wouldn't like to see a mammoth? Okay,
I mean,
there's a reason I'm saying hubris, okay?
Right, what
hubris is when you get cursed by the gods, okay? And you get specifically cursed by the gods when you start challenging the
don't
gods.
They know the story of the golem?
Or all of these, you shall not trespass in God's domain kind of stuff. That's a real story, and we've done it over and over again.
Over and over again.
And so, yeah, there's now a compound with literal monsters in it, with a giant fence around it, like Jurassic Park.
This actually exists.
This actually exists. They did it. They made them.
Did they not see those bad movies? It didn't end well.
For some reason, yeah, the stories about hubris never end well. They never end well.
This is amazing. What an amazing act of hubris. I wonder how long
and yet they are beautiful animals. It is amazing what they have created. And I'll say created too. They did not take dire wolf DNA, extract it, and put it into an egg, which then came out of a dog and was a dire wolf. What they did is they sequenced portions of dire wolf DNA that they thought would be useful, like parts that would make an animal bigger, parts that would give it stronger jaws and teeth. The part that gives it a light-colored coat, because that makes it look more like the wolves on Game of Thrones. And so it was, they very specifically were creating a look as much as anything else.
It's just that makes me so deeply uncomfortable.
And the look was designed to be looking like this monstrous animal. But okay, so they did an amazing feat of science. They changed 20 genes at a time that had never been done before. So using CRISPR, they analyzed what was in 75,000-year-old direwolf DNA, sequenced it, made artificial DNA that copied the sequence for the genes they wanted that would give bigger teeth and stronger muscles, used CRISPR and inserted it into a gray wolf, and then took that gray wolf nucleus with this modified DNA, put it into an egg, and then an in vitro fertilization into a dog. And then the dog gave birth to these dire wolf pups. But they were, almost all of their DNA was gray wolf with just these 20 modified genes. Of those 20 modified genes, 5 were modified just to stop blindness and deafness. So they were corrected ahead of time. So the 15 were directly from the dire wolf and were specifically for size, and they tested them. So they made these huge muscle-bound beagles using dire wolf genes that increase muscle size. And so there's these like, jacked beagles they had as a test. When they were working on mammoths, they created woolly mice. That was the previous test. They did 5 edits at the same time.
I read about the woolly mice.
They were so cute.
I remember
Again, beautiful hubris.
This is not just hubris. This feels deeply wrong. Like
That's because the trespassing in God's domain stuff is deep, deep, deep in our stories. Our culture always knows that this goes wrong.
You're literally
This is the Tower of Babel. This is all this kind of stuff.
Living things that nature did not balance things out for. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're going to make or how it's actually going to exist over time. Like,
I think this is the right moment. Let me read from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Oh God.
So this is Victor von Frankenstein talking about his dream. No one can conceive of the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane. In the first enthusiasm of success, life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I could first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I could deserve theirs. I mean, what greater, modern tale of hubris can we have than Frankenstein? It just shows someone trying to play God and break through these bounds of life and death. And that's what these have done. They've recreated an extinct species that hasn't existed for 13,000 years.
They haven't even done that. From what you've said, they haven't recreated anything.
No.
They've literally mashed some things together and switched some things on and off.
What did Frankenstein do?
Made something
Did
brand
Frankenstein
new that didn't exist before.
actually make the thing? No, he took parts and he mushed them together and ended up with something that really had never existed before. That's what I'm talking about. They've made a Frankenstein. But it's Frankenstein's monster. They've made it a monster.
This is why it feels so deeply wrong.
And yet they are gorgeous. They are. There's no bolts sticking out of their neck. They are absolutely beautiful.
So when do we have super wealthy people paying them to make creatures to order? Like
soon, probably as soon as they can sort out the regulations.
My skin is crawling.
Okay, so this is a startup company. They have between $10 and $30 billion, depending on what you read, because they have their own. They declare their own market capitalization, so it's difficult to know. So they have a lot riding on this. This is the first success. They made those woolly mice in the idea of making a woolly mammoth, but then they realized that elephants are difficult, and no one had ever done in vitro fertilization with an elephant, and we didn't really know much about it. And they were also trying to do the dodo, and they have the dodo genes pretty much figured out. They were going to also recreate a dodo using some of its relatives, and then some of the exact extent DNA and remake a dodo. But eggshells are difficult. With a mammal, you can literally stick a pipette into an egg and suck the nucleus out. And then you can put a new nucleus in there, and it's all pretty easy, or relatively easy. It's been well-trodden technology now for almost 40 years. And we know how to do this with dogs, and dogs are commercially cloned, and people can get clones of their existing dog, and that is an existing business model. And so they were able to take the commercial cloning of dogs and just do some genetic editing on it, which they were really good at. The woolly mouse was a test run for woolly mammoth. They gave up on that, gave up on the dodo, and said, we can really do dogs, and so let's do the dire wolf. But yeah, they're creating an apex predator for an ecosystem that doesn't exist, and it's incredible, charisma that makes the whole thing worthwhile in that way.
Sorry, who's funding this? Have you looked into that? Do you know who's paying for this?
They always say private funding.
Yeah, I'm sure it's private.
Yeah, exactly.
Very private.
Yeah. So so we have, yes, literally created monsters during these what seem almost like end times, so that when all the world goes, they will break free and start repopulating North America, and we'll be their number one prey. Because what's slower and tastier?
I mean, that's kind of like saying the machines are going to revolt against
No,
us.
of course it's not really going to happen, but we
Still,
did.
What could go wrong when
What
you
could go
create
wrong?
an
We
apex
really-
predator for an environment that doesn't exist? That doesn't
We
make
really
any
did
sense.
make lot monsters, and we really are,
And it really is a Frankenstein monster. It's a mashup.
It's
of
a
something
mashup,
they
and at the
didn't
same time, we
recreate
think we can
anything.
control them by being the ones that feed them, but instead we're really just habituating them to
Well,
humans.
going back to Game of Thrones, I just rewatched that episode where that guy got eaten by his own dogs. He
Yeah.
thought, oh, they're loyal to me.
Horrible. I don't
She
even want
was
to talk
like,
about him.
Yeah, but they're starving now, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's
and you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that felt good in Game of Thrones, but that feels like that's going to happen here.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just sort of what I wanted to point out, is that this is a story that we've seen many, many times. It's really interesting to think of it as part of our story. We made these wolves extinct. We evolved with wolves that became our dogs. I think so. We know that our dogs were selected from wolves. But when we look at the wolf DNA they were selected from, those wolves branched off 1 million years ago from other wolves. So the original gray Eurasian wolf of the steppes was not the ones we get our dogs from. I think that we domesticated a group of wolves that specialized in humans. And sometimes they preyed on us, and sometimes they worked with us. And that we were chasing the herds, and sometimes we were scavengers, and sometimes we were hunters. And when we were scavenging from the wolves a lot of the time. And when the wolves were scavenging, they were scavenging from us a lot of the time.
So you're saying we evolved with the wolves in a way that predated history significantly?
Yeah. So these dire wolves are a perfect example of really primal hubris. We are going to create our dream, our nightmare, and our dream, and our companion, and the most beautiful thing we can think of in our deepest brain is the things we grew up with, providing us with food, but also the dangers in the night. You build your fire to keep the wolves away. And 1 million years ago, we weren't even fully human. We were Homo erectus, in Eurasia, and we extended all the way from Europe to China. We had hand axes, we had fire, but we didn't have advanced. We didn't even have spears, right? So this was a very early group. We know that there are contemporary oral histories of Native Americans working with wolves in Wyoming to hunt. Just like people hunt with dolphins, where the dolphins actually herd the fish towards the nets. These were Native Americans working with wolves who would herd the game towards the people throwing the spears. And that this is no longer a practice because the wolves are gone and the people are gone, but they remembered doing this, and it wasn't that many generations ago. And they're, actually repopulating some of these areas with wolves now.
That's
in Wyoming.
fascinating.
So really deep in our brains, we've always liked these animals. And so when we get the power, it's going to be the first one we turn to, and for very specific scientific reasons, because they're the ones we know how to, because we've lived with them the longest. They were the first things we learned how to do, things like cloning and genetic modifications of. Beagles are a major study animal. We do a lot of our science on beagles.
I did not realize that dogs were the animals that we'd been with the longest. I thought that cattle, because I knew that cattle were with us from the beginning of our history.
Yeah.
But this is prehistory a significant amount.
By at least as much again. So cattle are in our artwork 10,000 years ago, they're living with us in corrals 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, but they're still wild. So we have herds where we're herding wild cows. We take them out into the hills and they periodically breed with wild bulls and they come back. So they're not genetically separate. And then around 5,000 years ago, they become genetically separate. That's a tremendously deep history. We've always been with the cows. But the wolves go back 1 million years as part of our, they were our living companions.
Yeah, no, I had no idea.
And as dogs, 20,000 years, somewhere in there. So there's a roughly 20,000-year-old wolf skull that has dog teeth. So wolves have sort of hooks for teeth, whereas dogs they're wider and more for crushing bones. And so they're more dedicated to the scavenging because we would hunt with them and we'd give them the bones. And so the wolf teeth weren't as necessary because they didn't need to catch things.
We gave them the bones. We didn't end up fighting with them over the food?
Well, some of that probably happened for a while. Yeah. And then we started making them ours. And so that is where we see a change in the actual skeletons.
Right.
From a sharp-toothed animal.
So the dogs that we hunted with that you're talking about.
The wolves that we hunted with.
The wolves that we hunted with 500,000 years ago were not, they also lived with us. They weren't just wild wolves. They were wild in that they weren't pets that had a collar around their neck.
They lived near us.
They knew us.
They knew us. They interacted with us. They would wait for the hunting party to go out, work with the hunting party. Yeah, all of that was probably happening.
I've never heard this version of history.
It's based on some maybe separate evidence points. I'm conjecturing slightly.
Separate evidence points. Interesting.
So you can't draw direct lines, but there is evidence that traditional peoples have worked with wolves for hunting. We know we do it with dogs.
Yeah.
You don't have to train them. They know how to do it right away. I would run down a trail. Piper would cut into the woods, run down the trail, and then cut back at a right angle. And more than once, she had a deer in front of her.
Yeah,
and
instinctive.
And she would put that deer right in front of me and just knew exactly how to do it. And the wolves do it with each other, right? They don't have to talk about it.
Right.
The wolves will drive an animal towards another wolf. They know how to do this. They just have to figure out to do it with us.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that we've been doing this for a very long time. So the very first dog skull that we know about, only difference from a wolf is slightly thicker teeth, and it's in a cave with a bone in its mouth. So we put that bone in its mouth.
Yeah.
After it died.
Yeah, and because we cared about that thing.
Because we cared about that thing. Yeah. So this is so deep in like our natures of our understandings of afterlife, of the world we interact with, of how we get things in the world has to do with dogs.
Yeah.
And we have now created the ultimate member of the species. We've recreated it, except not really. We've created a monstrous version that looks absolutely gorgeous. And so I just sort of wanted to connect that to the wider stories of hubris, connecting to nature. The Sparrow's song is its own hubris, and come and see me, I'm beautiful, and it is a beautiful song. It's also dangerous to the sparrow, right? It's singing. There's hawks. They know the song. They can find it. They know exactly what it is. My cat certainly knows exactly what it is. There's always been this element of I am wonderful and this is dangerous, but I'm projecting this to the outside world, and it's going out for a whole bunch of reasons. I'm making a territory. Other males should stay away. Females should come to me.
I'm creating my own environment.
And then linking that to the idea of the world we've lived in with the wolves and the dogs for the last 1 million years, and that we're sort of without any real thought, following that plan, because we can, and that we write books about it, we film movies about it, we warn ourselves over and over again, and we just keep doing it because it's so deep.
Yeah,
and it's beautiful too. I mean, Rome is beautiful, and you blood-stained streets everywhere, but oh my God, it's so gorgeous.
Is it worth it though?
Well, I mean, I hope so.
We do it anyway.
I would like more, monuments to our hubris that are beautiful. I think these dire wolves are one. I hope it doesn't go completely wrong.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Exactly.
All right, folks. We'll put up some links at mindbodyevolution.info. That was fascinating as always, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Mind Body Evolution with Dr. Josh Stout. and Eric Burkett. Go to mindbodyevolution.info